Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another interview. On my end, it's 5 a.m., but that is not going to stop me to interview one of my good friends and the guy that I just jinxed on winning a tournament, MonteXristo. How are you doing, Monty?
Well, what's up, CastMin? I'm doing pretty well. Thank you very much for getting up at 5 a.m. to interview me, and thank you very much for giving me the caster blessing and letting me take the dub in that tournament.
It
Big win coming out was good for the confidence.
it even works when I am not casting it.
hmm
Yeah, I am glad it worked out, but now that you're here for the first time, people get to know a little bit about yourself, so who are you in real life when you're not playing LR?
So when I'm not playing LOR, I am an insurance broker, which is a really, really boring day job. But I also stream, which CastMin knows, and I'm sure some of you guys know, because I'm sure some of you guys are tuning in from my channels. But yeah, I stream 4 nights a week, and then I go to the office day in, day out, do my thing there. But yeah, streaming is really where it's at for me. It's really what I want to be doing, so we're working towards that goal.
And what's your background in terms of card games? Where did you come from before playing LR?
So let me actually let me take a peek. Maybe I have something in one of these drawers. Something spicy to show off. Oh no, I must have placed it elsewhere. So the first real card game I played was technically Yu-Gi-Oh! Because everybody played Yu-Gi-Oh! In the schoolyard as a kid. Everybody had some random pack of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards lying around. Nobody really knew how to play properly. Um, Played some Pokemon TCG in the schoolyard as well. Again, nobody knew how to play properly. But my first real foray into card games, competitively, not competitively, whatever you want to call it, my first serious attempt at learning how to play a card game was Hearthstone. I started in the early beta. I didn't actually make it to Legend until the year I quit. I never actually tried super hard to get there. But I quit back in 2018 after the Blitzchung and the Hong Kong stuff. Blizzard left a really nasty taste in my mouth. Lore had just started, so I switched over pretty quickly. I also played a little bit of Chaotic. That's a physical card game I had uh, cards for. So, but other than that, Lore's really been. I think I've spent more time on Lore than almost any other card game at this point.
And
So
in,
it's my number one.
in Hearthstone, did you get to play competitively or join any tournament, at least for fun or pure ladder play?
I played a couple of tournaments here and there. Not too much. Just dip my foot in. It's hard to get into competitive card gaming when you don't really know where to start. And I was only I only managed to get in Runeterra because I got really lucky and found lots of great resources all from all the other players in this community that are so willing to share their knowledge.
Yeah, that sounds definitely cool. And what made you pick up LOR? What's the reason behind?
Well, I was done with Hearthstone and I wanted a new card game. I've always been very much a strategy and like more of a mental game player than I have been a like I played MOBAs, I played other stuff. Obviously, I played League since beta as well. So when League said they were coming out with a card game and Hearthstone had the Blitzchung Hong Kong stuff going on, it was a pretty much a no-brainer, easy switch.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. But the single deck showdown, how did you guys get the idea of making a single deck event?
So Mo put out a tweet longer, which I'm sure some of you saw because everybody follows Mo. If you don't follow Mo, it's a great Twitter account to follow. Um, but he put out a tweet longer talking about how he likes sideboard format and how it people are wrong. The lore community is wrong in saying that its lore is not meant for single deck sideboard formats, and how we should really give the format another chance. I never played in a sideboard tournament. I am a relatively small streamer, so I just shot Mo. Mo and I chat sometimes. We're pals, I would say. So I responded to that tweet saying I never got to try out sideboard. I'd like to. Why don't we do a little streamer showdown? And then Mo jumped on it. He immediately got into my Twitter DMs. Was like, "Yeah, I'm in." And then Squeeby messaged me about it, and Squeeby started organizing the back end. Then Mo messaged BBG and Seth and Deech, and it just kind of blew up. And it was like snap of the fingers, and it appeared. Big shout outs to everybody who played a part in coming out to play or do any of the back end stuff. It was a great success, I think. We ended up getting Doza and Boulevard to cast it, as well as Divinity of Phil, I think, cast it in Portuguese. So for an event that started as a subtweet, it really ended up being something special. And I hope we get to do more of these because it was a really good time, and I think it was a good show for the community as well.
Definitely.
Maybe
And
CastMin can cast the next one for us.
please take me in. I'm casting at any hour, at any time of the day, and any day. But enough about that. How did you guys settle on the format, like the 8 people and then double elim? Was that something that you all agreed, or was that something that you came up with by talking and talking?
So when Mo and I first sat down and like started talking about it, we were like, let's just keep it small. Don't want it to be anything too big. So we ended up we had 4 people right off the bat that were interested in playing, and then Mo was like, why don't we get a Brazilian player in here or 2, if we can, and then we'll ask BBG. So then we had 6, and 6 is kind of a rough number to have as like a bracket. So we just ended up going to 8, make it even, round it out. And then we ended up deciding on the rules just all together. Somebody, I think Mo again, was the one that suggested 10-card sideboard, and BBG said double elim, no bracket reset. He does not like bracket resets. I did offer to let him play the bracket reset at the end anyways if he changed his mind. He said no. He hates them, so that's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm not sure I would have been able to take it in a bracket reset. So
Yeah, and how did you feel about the first experience with the single deck format, or what did you expect from the single deck format plus the sideboard?
I didn't really know what to expect because, like I said, I've never played in a tournament like this before. Um, I kind of figured that each matchup would be a little bit different, and then game 1, game 2, and game 3 would be different because everybody's making micro adjustments to their lists, and they're only gonna get better at making those adjustments and improvements to their list as the games go on. Especially when you have to play the same person twice, like I did when I played BBG in the winners finals, and then again in the grand finals. By game 2 of the I would say by game 3 of the winners finals, BBG had almost certainly figured out what his sideboards needed to be for my deck list. It took me a little bit longer. I didn't end up figuring out what the perfect sideboard for that matchup was until literally the last game. But it was very interesting having to think about those decisions and come up with what are the best 40 cards in this particular matchup. And then after the first game, what are the best 40 cards in this matchup after I take into account what he's going to put into his deck? How does that change things? What do I actually want? Yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into it. It was very cool.
And I think one of the most important questions, at least for the people watching, is were you allowed to sideboard first when you saw your opponent or after you played around?
So we had to play the first game without sideboarding, and then after the first game we were allowed to sideboard, and after the second game we were allowed to sideboard again if we wanted.
Alright, speaking of the decks and of the sideboard, let's jump straight into it and let's see what the count has brought to this tournament. You did not bring, let's say, something very special, very unique, but something that is very consistent. Azirelia, all demons are coming back to haunt us. Please know, it won a tournament after all, and that's what this deck does. So my first question would be, because it was a sideboard event, why did you settle up for this core of cards when you are going to face other opponents for the first time?
So one thing you'll notice about this list right now is that there's no Green Glade Duo. And that's because Green Glade Duo is technically a sideboard card. It's not great in every matchup. You really don't even want it in a lot of your matchups. I know Darkodius, the Aurelia's Ear Master, the gentleman who gave me the deck, who gave me the keys to success, has said that he would not play Green Glade Duo if he didn't have to. He's only got it in his ladder list because he feels it's necessary for some matchups. It was actually his idea to tell me to just remove him completely and put him in the sideboard. And that was like a very last minute thing. God bless. He got it in time because that came up huge. The extra Twin Disciplines and the Shapestone. So I ended up putting in extra Twin Disciplines, a Shapestone, and the Nopify is what I made room for, or the third Treasure Seeker, depending on how you want to look at it and what the ladder list currently is. And I think that decision carried me a lot because I really didn't need the Green Glade duo in any of the early matches. And I did make mistakes in my sideboarding and accidentally put it into some matchups that I probably shouldn't have, but didn't end up getting punished for it.
But I think you were one of the apostles of Defiant Dance. I think you were one of the people on Twitter saying this card is broken, you are sleeping on this card. Why are we seeing it here? Or what's the purpose or the reason that it's broken?
So Defiant Dance is just the ultimate slow speed punish. When you have a Deus and a Zir, or even, like, honestly, even just an Azirelia down, just so you can get the one extra Blade Dance, you're almost always going to get tempo down from Defiant Dance, and you're almost always going to push damage too. Some common ladder matchups that you might see right now is Swain TF. It's there's still a little bit of Gnosis Thresh out there, and Lurk. You can Defiant Dance the Swain when it comes down, and then suddenly they've got nothing to do. You can Defiant Dance a GP in a Pirates matchup, and they've just lost 5 mana, and you're pushing damage. It's just a really, really, really good card. The other thing you'll notice is that we have Homecomings over Wills, and people were saying, oh, with Will going back to 4 mana, why don't we just play Will? Well, Defiant Dance kind of covers almost everything Will wants to do, and the dual-sided effect of Homecoming is actually really, really useful in this list, especially with the spicy Field Musicians tech, which came up huge in some of the games. If you go back and watch through that VOD, you'll see just how great the Field Musicians can be.
Yeah, what was the reason actually for including Field Musicians? Because it's one of the sweet new techs in the deck.
So, with the deck being forced to slow down, there's just room for it now, and you kind of need something to bridge you from that mid game into the late game. If you've played Azirelia Azir, you know that the deck kind of peters out and it goes into top deck mode very, very early on. If you top deck a Field Musician, suddenly Blossoming Blade, Dunekeeper, Ribbon Dancer, and even Blossoming Blade, Dunekeeper, Ribbon Dancer, and even Treasure Seeker all become activated and start drawing you cards and giving you spell mana. And it's just going to let you cycle through your deck a lot faster, and it's going to let you do Azirelia Azir things a lot more aggressively.
Just let you do Azirelia things, but you spoke about Treasure Seeker. This is a new card, so maybe you would like to elaborate on the inclusion of the new card in the deck.
So Treasure Seeker is a very, very versatile card in this deck. It's a very, very powerful card overall. Turns out Waking Sands is really, really good when you don't have to actually put that in your deck. But you can use this offensively. Oftentimes the Waking Sands is going to be 2 mana, 5 damage, which, I mean, hey, who doesn't love a stronger Decimate? Or you can also use it on defense, and just casting the Waking Sands will often just stop their attack dead out, because, well, who's going to attack into a 5/2? You're just going to lose a minion for free. So it's a versatile card that does a lot of the different things that this deck wants to do, and it almost always trades up, because 5/2 is a lot of stats.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense, and I've seen it in the European League games that we've been casting. That is both an offensive and defensive tool that is working out really well. Let's go over to the actual sideboard that you decided to bring in this tournament. And you said Green Glade Duo is a sideboard kind of card. Why?
So you're not usually going to win the game through Green Glade Duo's elusive pressure damage, right? Most games you're going to win by slowly chipping away at their board, continually making tokens. Azir's going to come down leveled up. You're going to get the +1/+1 buff on everything. Suddenly your board is too wide. They can't block everything. Azirelia comes in. You guys know how it is. Green Glade Duo is there for when they have methods of dealing with that wide board, or they're going to have units that can continuously block in your early game, and you just really need to shove damage aggressively and quickly. Most matchups that I was kind of expecting were going to be more mid-rangey to slower. And the elusive is like not as good as it was. So it just didn't make sense to put it into the main deck, because it was a slot that I could have used on buffs, which is what I ended up using the slot for. I put in the 3rd Twin Disciplines, the 3rd Shapestone, and either the third Treasure Seeker or the third Notified, depending on what your ladder list looks like. Um, yeah, and I think just freeing up that slot for the buffs it helped a lot. It just gave the deck a lot more reactivity and let you stick your champions and keep your champions safe a lot better, which is really what the deck wants to be doing.
Yeah, because your champions are infinite amounts of value with Azir every time you attack. And I don't think it's that hard to level him up anymore. Maybe I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later. But the way I'm seeing this, or you could say if I'm wrong or if I'm right, your sideboard is little packages for different matchups. You don't really just put one card for this, one card for that. More like I put a few cards of this for this matchup, a few cards for that. So which packages did you bring for certain matchups?
So I actually ended up bringing every single card in the sideboard at one point or another. The Greenglade duos I ended up teching in against Mo, who was on Scouts, because I figured I would have to race him. I don't know if that was the correct decision at the end of the day, but it's the decision I made. And I ended up winning that set, even though I hard punted game 2. Mo hard punted game 3 right back. Mo was just trying to do your boy a favor and give him a dub. It's okay. He was looking out for the crew. So the Greenglade duos ended up going in. That's more of an aggressive tech. The Ghost went in with the Greenglade duos. The Ruthless Predator also went in against Mo because I figured the added vulnerable effect would be good for removing his MF. It didn't end up coming up, but that was a really spicy tech. The Ruthless Predator was also there for a mirror. Deny was there for any slower matchup where I'd want to deal with something like that. I didn't end up putting it in against BBG because I felt the Nopifies and the retreats were better. I also added the Ghost in that matchup because I wanted the ability to kill him with a big elusive Azir if that ever came up. And I ended up putting in the extra field musicians for the BBG matchup as well because I knew it was going to be a more long drawn out game and I wanted to see more of my deck. The other kind of package I guess I had, it was really a matter of adding the denies and the retreats to kind of help you stabilize a little bit more, and the field musicians to help you take the game longer, and then adding the Greenglade duos and the Ghost to help you close out the game a little bit earlier. So those are kind of the two sides of my sideboard, if you'll excuse the double word.
Yeah, definitely. And if I remember correctly, against BBG was on Echo Zillion, right?
Yes, he was, which is actually a rather tough matchup for the deck. The drop borders kind of come up huge, and the Hexite crystals can be really, really hard to deal with. And then if you do end up getting to the point where your Azir and your Aurelia leveled up, and they have gotten a leveled Echo on the board, they can just trade down their board, get the free predict off of the leveled up Echo, and then hit the rally and revive their entire board and kill you. It's really not as easy as you'd think it would be, especially not against a phenomenal player like BBG.
Yeah, and I think you were losing to him in the main bracket, right? And you were coming back to take it back home in the grand final. So, what did you learn from the first games against BBG and against his deck?
So I learned that I needed to protect my champions a little bit more. I think set 1, game 2, I ended up throwing because I didn't protect my Azir properly. I had an option to protect an Azir or go for a more aggressive line, and I took the more aggressive line and got punished for it. And had I just played it a little bit more passively and played around my Azir more, I think I would have ended up getting there. I also learned, even from game 2 to game 3 in the grand finals, I ended up making different sideboard choices. I completely pulled out all of the homecomings and everything. There was no homecomings and no defiant dances in my end deck. I just found that by the time I ended up using them, he always had mana to replay what I bounced. So there was no point in having the bounce at all. And he was sideboarding stuff like Ruin Runners, which you can't bounce. So I ended up removing all the bounces to add retreat returns to better protect my Azir, and Ghost to try and cheese out a victory with that method.
And it paid off
I,
because you won against him.
I
But
did.
if you had to tell people about a few challenges, because I think you are the best experiment, if I can call you, that we can get most information on the sideboard type of game, because you did not play in it, you ended up winning it. So if there were any challenges for you getting into this sideboard event, or which were the challenges that you faced?
So I think deck selection is a little bit restrictive in sideboards because you want a deck with a very linear game plan that can be adjusted to speed up or slow down its linear game plan, which is as you guys saw with my sideboard is exactly what I did. I put in cards that would let me play a little bit longer, and I put in cards that would force me into playing quicker. Um, so a lot of LOR decks are not quite so linear. Like, let's look at TF Fizz, for example, a Blast from the Past, a deck I've put a lot of time on, a deck I've had a lot of fun with. That's not a linear deck. That deck's cards are pretty much 40 for 40 set in stone. You don't really have a lot of room to maneuver with that. So the deck selection is a little bit limited with sideboard, and I felt that a bit when I was looking at what should I bring. I ended up bringing Azirelia Azir because it's what I'd played on ladder for my 22-hour stream on day 2 of the expansion, and it was literally what I've been most practiced on. Um, was I a bit of a jerk bringing Azirelia Azir to a for fun tournament? Yeah, perhaps, but I mean, we're going up against the best of the best here, so you got to bring your all, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you said that there are some decks that are very restrictive. They have a core set in stone, and there are decks that you can juggle with the cards a bit. So, what would you bring in the future to a the sideboard event? Something that already has a strong core, or something that gives you more space for maneuver, but it's not that strong.
So I think you can kind of go either way. Irelia Zirin is an example of a deck that has a very strong 36 card core, 30 card core, depending on how firm you want to be. Nasa's Thresh, another deck that has a very strong 30 card core that you can kind of maneuver with and push slower, faster. But then you also have stuff like Demacia Allegiance or Bilgewater Allegiance. I very heavily considered Bilgewater Allegiance, which would be the same 37 cards, and then your sideboard would just be stuff like Hush, Will, Concussive Palm, stuff like that. Something from every region that would give you a different opportunity into a different matchup. Um, what I think I would recommend going more so with a deck like Aurelia Azir or Gnosis Thresh, which has a solid base, but is flexible in the way you can build it and you can play it. Um, so, yeah, I think Dravenez is probably also a relatively okay choice for a sideboard, especially now that we're getting more cards that can potentially go into that archetype, like Time Winder and Boom Baboon. So I think flexible decks with a straightforward game plan are best. I know Dravenez kind of has a not so straightforward game plan, and it kind of contradicts what I've just said. But um, yeah, decks that have interesting tech choices are probably the best thing to bring to a sideboard.
Yeah, definitely. But you said you played the deck for 22 hours on stream, and I need to ask you if the comfort factor played a role in your win or in your games.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anytime people ask me about lineups, especially when they come to my stream and they're like, "Hey, I'm just starting to get into tournaments. I don't know what to play. How do I build a lineup?" Or I'm going into seasonal for the first time. I qualified through Gauntlet. What do I play? I just tell them pick the 3 decks you're most comfortable on, because at the end of the day, it doesn't. If you're not an experienced tournament player and you're not 100% on, well, this is what my lineup wants to do. These are my decks. Their weaknesses are X, Y, Z. Their strengths are A, B, C. Therefore I'm gonna ban EFG. Um, Without that knowledge, the only thing you have to rely on is your comfort and your knowledge of your own deck and how it operates. So the best thing to do with any tournament is, especially one where you're uncertain of, like I was uncertain of how this sideboard tournament was going to work out, is to just bring your best, your most comfortable deck. That is going to take you the furthest. It's going to give you the best results, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do agree, but after you've played this event, do you think that are there any strong points? Are there any points that you could work on such an event?
Yeah, so I think I really liked the thought that I had to put into my deck selection and my both my sideboard and my 40 card deck, because as we talked about already, my 40 card deck was not your standard ladder list. And while tournament lists aren't always your standard ladder lists, they're usually pretty close, maybe a 1 or 2 card difference. Taking Greenglade a duo out of Azirelia Azir is not something I think most people watching would expect, or it's not something they would think of doing. It's not something I thought of doing. All credits for that go to Darkodius. Um, Honestly, all credits for my dub go to Darkodius because the man did me a solid and took care of me. We talked about everything. He really put in the work for me on this one. But yeah,
You keep mentioning Darkodius, so I need to ask you if you had. This is a question that we ask all the people. If you had anyone helping you out besides Darkodius, or maybe even screaming.
yeah, I had all of the Wobbly Wombats chiming in their opinions. So Z Turtle, Seku, Milk, Spikes, Cheeser Dude, True Monarch is in our chat as well. Who else do we got? We have Yang and Zini and RXBXN, who's playing Hearthstone, and Manasia, of course, who is another Aurelia Azir, excellent Aurelia Azir player. All of them weighed in, gave their opinions, helped me out with the list. It was I'm very, very lucky to have great teammates that were there. We didn't scrim too much for it because I had played the deck for 22 hours straight the day before, so I was feeling kind of okay into any matchup. And we also didn't really know what to expect in our to scrim. But yeah, they all chimed in with the deck selection. Manasia is the one who convinced me to bring the Ruthless Predator, and I really liked that sideboard bring. I don't know if I actually got to play it. I think I did. I think I drew it in one game, but that was a really spicy tech. He was like, "Yeah, I got wrecked by this on ladder one time in the mirror. I think you should bring it." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. You know what? Sounds fantastic." And I heard through the rumor mill that Mo was bringing scouts, so I figured that'll do well into scouts too because it'll let me deal with the MF.
Yeah, and it turned out quite alright. But we are nearing the end of the interview, and there's another traditional question that we used to ask people, and that is if you could say only one thing to the audience before we're closing this interview, which one would that be?
I love you all. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful night.
That is being spoken like a true champion. Thank you again, Monty, for being around, and thank you guys for watching this. Stay tuned because the interview series is not going to stop as long as we're going to have tournaments, grassroots tournaments, or big tournaments. Until next time.